Test.
As you all know, now we start with Margarita. Please.
Good morning, everyone. So I'm Margarita, and I'm going to present to you, in the case of Lebanon, the alteration of the Lebanese coastal line and the interactions between the communities and the shore. So I will begin by saying that the coasts in general are one of the most complex ecosystems to exist on Earth because they are highly dynamic. And when we add the human societies and communities by the shore, it becomes more and more complex and more interesting to study them. Zooming into Lebanon, Lebanon has 225 kilometers of a shoreline from its north to its south. And unfortunately, 80% of the shore belongs to the private sector. So the luxury development and the private resorts. So the population is in rupture with the sea and the water, which is the elements that speaks the most about their historical identity. I can speak more after about the historical aspect, but I will just go to the beginning of the privatization of the sea. It goes back to the civil war between the 1975 and the 1990, where investors took advantage of the absence of the state, and they began the construction of private resorts everywhere on the shore in Lebanon. They violated a law that goes like this. The seashore till the farthest distance that the wave could reach in winter, and sand shores and pebbles belong to the public. And after that the civil war has ended, the Lebanese people believe that most of these investors became part of the government, so nothing changed. And not only that, but the problem was exaggerated, so now we only have 20% of the beach that belongs to the public. I know that this problem exists in many countries, not only in Lebanon, but specifically in Lebanon, the privatization of the sea has become a major symbol of corruption. So this subject is really important for the Lebanese citizens. I would like to just put an idea about the adaptation of the societies. For the Lebanese case, I think personally that their adaptation, like maybe most of you know that the Lebanese people are experts in resilience, and after a war, a crisis, an explosion. But this adaptation to change in the Lebanese case has two aspects, one negative and one positive. For example, in Beirut, the positive part is, for example, after the explosion of the port in 2020, after 2 weeks, all the streets were already clean. The citizens were mobilized to reconstruct everything. So we are really, we adapt, we do things after crisis and how to say, catastrophes. But also in Beirut, back to the subject of privatization of the sea, we only have one public beach that's left. And it's in danger of privatization also because there are plans of constructing a boutique hotel. We should know that the Lebanese coast, back to the historical aspect, I won't enter into details, but the Lebanese coast holds some cities with the oldest human settlements in the world, like Beirut, Saida, and Tyre. And today, the coast is filled with many archaeological remains from different layers of civilizations, back to the Phoenicians, the Greeks, the Romans. And maybe we can find salvation in the presence of these archaeological remains by the shore, because in many cases it has saved the shore from the privatization movement. So for example, in the case of G, I did my project in this region. It's not far from Beirut, and it's on the coast also. For example, on this map, it has only a 7-kilometer sandy beach, and only in this 7-kilometer, we can find more than 20 private resorts. But there was only one space with no constructions, and it was because there are archaeological remains. So by this, we can know that where there is cultural traces, ancient traces, it has potential of still having public access to the beach. And so this archaeological remains has many layers of civilization, like the most of the archaeological remains in Lebanon. So back to the Phoenicians, the Hellenistic, the Romans, and what we can see is the Byzantine layer. So there is a fragmented church by the beach with the settlements and the necropolis area, the ancient cemetery. And also in GIE, there is an important project, and that is of the rehabilitation of the fisherman port and the construction of the fish market. And this project has saved the activity of 72 local fishermen. Finally, in the case of Anfe, it's another coastal city in the north Lebanon. It's a highly touristic region because it looks like Greece. But I think that this coastal city has made the equilibrium between tourism, culture, history, and the local people's activities. So, for example, we can see the restaurants and everything, but also the archaeological remains has left many parts of the city with public access to the beach. And also, as we can see in this picture, this goes to the production of sea salt that the local people do. So it also has saved a big space in this area for the public access. In conclusion, I think it's very important to try to integrate the archaeological remains in the city fabric by highlighting the activities of the people on the shore, rather than just preserving the archaeological remains as like private islands that are static, isolated islands far away from the local people's activities and interests. This picture goes to the, it's a movement to save from the privatization of the sea, and it's called The Sea is Mine. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Krina. I'm a diploma student. And first of all, I would like to thank Professor Osterbeek for being my supervisor. And of course, I would like to thank all the organizers of Apheleia seminar for giving us this opportunity to be here. So my topic is about an ethnic group from Moldova and about their heritage between Orthodoxy and Turkic origins, and also about their adaptation and transformation during different historical periods. So here you have the structure of my presentation. First of all, I'm going to give you a context. Who are the Gagauz people? And after that, I'm going to talk a little bit about the complexity of the Gagauz origins. And after that, I'm going to give you some information about their heritage. And finally, I'm going to talk a little bit about their adaptation and transformation during different historical periods. So here you have the methodologies that I used for this work. You have two methods, the analytical method and the observation method. And you can see as well the keywords of my work, which are origins, the Gagauz, heritage, adaptation, and transformation. So who are the Gagauz people? You can see here a map. First of all, of Moldova, because I know very well that Moldova is not a country well known by everyone. So Moldova is between Romania and Ukraine. And in the south of Moldova, the green color that you can see, there is the Gagauz people. There are 4 regions, which are 4 dispersed enclaves. So Gagauz people is a Turkic ethnic group, and they are Eastern Orthodox Christians. And also, the Gagauz people from Moldova are the biggest community of Gagauz people in the world. About the complexity of their origins. So, it's really complicated to say which are the real origins of these people, because there is a considerable lack of sufficient historical documentation. And because of that, there are at least 21 theories as to their ethnogenesis. However, there are 2 main categories. On one hand, there are historians saying that they have Turkic origins because of a linguistic factor. Gagauz people, they speak Gagauz language, and this language is a part of the family of languages, of Turkic languages. And you have the other theory, which is Bulgarian origins. So the historians are saying, but mostly the historians from Bulgaria have this theory. And they say that Gagauz people are actually Bulgarian that forgot their language during the Empire Ottoman, but they kept their religion. And here's a map for you, just to see the path of Gagauz people, how they arrived to Moldova. So just quickly to say something about their economic activities. They have agriculture, cattle farming, and wine growing. And about the heritage. So you have, you know actually, that their heritage is really very diverse. So their heritage is between Orthodox and Turkic origins. Gagauz people are actually very, very attached to their orthodoxy. They respect all the religious celebrations. Also, they have a rich folklore. They have their traditional songs, Turco and Mani. They have their dances, Aroyun, Frlikunda, Kadincha. And still about their heritage. Because they have Turkic origins, they do have many rituals and traditions related to the Turkic people, for example, as the ritual Kurban. Also, they have a lot of celebrations to worship animals such as wolves and horses. And regarding their language, so Gagavuz language is part of the list of endangered languages since 2010. So, about the adaptation and transformation of the Gagavuz people. I'm going to be back here. So, as I already told you, there are not a lot of historical documentation about their origins, but there are some documents saying that from the 13th century, some Turkic people, like Oghuz people, Seljuk people, they migrated from Anatolia to the Balkans. So this is the first document that you have about these people, and they arrived in Moldova in 1812 in the context of Russo-Turkish wars with the annexation of the Bessarabia. Bessarabia is the historical name of the actual Republic of Moldova. And during this period, Gagavuz people, they had some privileges from the Russian Tsar. And also, during this period, it was created the Syriac alphabet for the Gagavuz language. Before that, they used the Greek alphabet. And after that, you have the second period of the adaptation of Gagavuz people, and it's about the period of Greater Romania. It's from 1918 to 1940. So in 1918, Moldova was part from 1918 was part of the big Romania, and during this period, the Gagavuz people relatively well assimilated, and here you have to mention this factor of the same religion. And also during this period that it was created the Gagavuz Romanian dictionary. The second part about their adaptation and transformation, so from 1940 till 1990. So in 1940, Bessarabia, Bessarabia was annexed again from the USSR, and from 1940 till 1990, in the territory of Republic of Moldova, there was an intense Slavic colonization. But here I have to mention that the south of Moldova, and especially the Gagavuz people, they were more intensely Russificated. And the Russian language becomes the only language to be used. From 1990 to the present. So you have the dissolution of the USSR. And during this period, the Republic of Moldova obtained its independence from the USSR. And also, the Gagavuz people, they showed their desire to have their own independence. But here is to mention that you have also the context of Transnistria. And Transnistria, I'm going to show, so there is the Transnistria, with the capital Tiraspol. It's a region from Moldova, but during the dissolution of USSR, they also showed their desire to be independent. So in 1994, the Gagavuz people, they obtained their autonomous territorial unit of Gagavuzia. So you can see the actual map of Moldova. So it's a little country, but we have this autonomous territorial unit of Gagavuzia, and you have the Transnistria. So some conclusions regarding Vegagauz people. I think that they took in account the complexity of their cultural dimension, so that helped them to mobilize and to preserve their heritage and their identity. And they could have this possibility, and they adapted to new political powers and social cultural changes. Thank you for your attention. Vă mulțumesc. Saulun.
Well, good morning. Thank you all for being here on this rainy Friday morning. So I'll talk to you about community and tourism adaptation for preservation in the region of the Chapada dos Veadeiros, which is a place really dear to me, and I know that the DCLAM students have already heard about it because I talk about it all the time. I'll start by giving you some context about the region, where it is located, how it was occupied, and how tourism has changed a little over the years. And this work was made through literature review of publication already existent, and the study of two cases, which are going to be the examples I'm going to give you, of the Kalunga community. So how they organize themselves for tourism in the area, and the Aldeia Multiétnica, which is a festival that happens near the national park. Okay. So for some context, I think the Zoom is right on the Brazil map, but it's okay. The national park is located right in the center, it's okay, in the center of the country. Okay. Thank you. It's located right in the center of Brazil. The local ecosystem is Cerrado, which was considered World Heritage Natural Site by UNESCO in 2001. Along with another national park near here, which I'm not going to talk about, but this area in red is the area that was first considered a national park by the national authorities, by IBAMA, so it has been preserved. They have preservation initiatives since the 20th century, and only in 2001 it was considered a World Heritage Site by UNESCO. Since it's in the center of the country, they had a late occupation. Sorry. Nothing's happening. Okay. Sorry. Brazil was occupied in the center a bit later on history, only when they started exploring and extracting gold. So this is when they started investing a little bit more in the center of Brazil. In the 20th century, there was a quartz exploitation in the area. So the area is really well known for having quartz crystal. And this is what started attracting tourism as well. So it all started with a bit of alternative tourism. It was out in the media as a place of mysticism, and it attracted many alternative people and hippies. That's it. So tourism started like this, and also because it was a really rural area, and the access was a bit difficult. But in 1940, 1950, interiorization policies started being made in Brazil. So roads were being built, and also the capital of the country, Brasilia, was built in the center, around 300 kilometers distant from the national park, which in Brazilian distance is not a lot. So it is really close to Brasilia when we talk about Brazilian distances. With less than 3-hour drive, we are there. And then in 1961, it was considered a national park by the national institution, IBAMA, and in 2001, UNESCO World Heritage Site. So with all these steps, tourism developed, evolved, things changed, and more recently, it has become a really popular place, especially with media influence. So famous artists, actors, influencers started going to the place, posting pictures, and attracting even more tourists, and a different type of tourist. And then luxury hotels started being constructed in the area, which was something that really disrupted a little bit the landscape. The type of tourism. However, the community is really well organized, and in different areas they have ecotourism systems. And I'm going to show you, so first the Kalunga case, the community Kalunga, which is located in this area circled. They host the most mainstream waterfall of the national park, which is Santa Bárbara. It started attracting too many tourists, and then the community organized itself, and they decided that there should be a daily limit of visitors per day, so only 300 people can go, can access it on a day, only 50 people at a time, and a local guide must be there with each person, each group of people. Of course, there are UNESCO regulations in the national park, but this waterfall specifically is next, it's on a near area, so it's not inside the protected area, but it's also part of the Cerrado ecosystem. And the Kalunga community, they do offer this type of ecotourism. They offer experiences where you can spend a day with a local guide, you can eat locally, you can visit local accommodations. But in a recent study where a researcher went and talked to the community, they do not feel that they own the tourism management of the village. And for it to really be considered sustainable type of tourism, it should be on their terms, and it should be on the terms of subsistence and not commercial development and economical development in the terms of capitalism. And also that the attractions, they should be more enjoyed by the community, and they shouldn't only be there as workers. Another example is the organization of the festival Aldeia Multiétnica, which is also called Encontro de Culturas, so a meeting, a reunion of cultures. It happens once a year in this other area next to the national park, close to one of the biggest cities that are a part of the park, Alto Paraíso. It always happens in July, and it is organized by a local indigenous community, and it's organized by them. It's all thought by and for them. So they also invite different indigenous people from all over the country, from different states. They all go there, they have debates, they have roundtables, they discuss topics for actions for the following year. Each year has a theme, like Apheleia. And what is interesting about this festival is that tourists are welcome, but they are not the center, they are not the focus. The focus is the organization among the different indigenous people of the country. I don't know. Okay. And then with these two examples, we can see that the community is engaged in the local tourism and providing a type of ecotourism for the people. They are really well organized as a community as well. I remember that during COVID, they were completely closed. They did not accept tourists at all. Many people from around the area wanted to go there to find refuge, for example, but they did not accept tourists at all. Everything was closed. People could not go there. But at the same time, it's growing and growing. It's attracting more and more tourists. And sometimes this might not be enough, and something must be done. But also, the community feels that they should be the center of this development. They should be the ones to find these solutions. And then I'll end the presentation with what one of the Kalunga members said in research, is that the new way of doing tourism in the area should be born in the communities and not in the tourism trade or university. And that's it. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Assalamualaikum. First of all, respected professors and beloved friends. And this morning, I would like to introduce myself. My name is If Bilgeswara Susilo. I'm from Indonesia, and I'm currently a student in the International Master in Quaternary and Prehistory. Thanks to Professor Luis Osterbeck to supervise me on this research. So, this morning I would like to talk and discuss with you all about the geological setting and conservation of Karang Sambung Geopark in Central Java, Indonesia. Okay, for the agenda for this today's presentation and discussion, I would like to introduce you first to some definitions, and we'll start about the methods and results of the geological setting of the area, the geopark and the geopark conservation, and there are also some problematics to be discussed. How is the geological setting of Karang Sambung area, and what are the methods and how to conserve the Karang Sambung Geopark? So, I would like to talk about the location of Karang Sambung Geopark. It is located in Indonesia, my home country. Indonesia is one of the largest archipelagic country with 17,000 islands, and as you can see over here, it's the Java Island. It's one of the most densely populated island compared to its size. And then there's also the physiography map by Van Bemmelen from 1949. So Karang Sambung area is located in the South Serayu mountain region. And then on the right side, you can see also the satellite view by the Google map and the digital elevation model, or DEM, of this research area by the software of Global Mapper. So by terminology, Karang Sambung in Indonesian or Javanese language means, Karang means coral or limestone, and Sambung means connected. So the ancient old people of before named this area after there are a lot of rocks over there, and they were connected of each other, so that's why they name it Karang Sambung. It's a coral limestone, connected coral limestone. And this location is also kind of deeply connected with me because my grandfather was originally from here, and he was buried there also. So I would like to start about the definition of geopark. So UNESCO defined geopark as nationally protected areas with a number of geoheritage sites of particular importance, rarity, or aesthetic appeal. Geopark is considered as innovative conservation to protecting the geoheritage assets while encouraging scientific research, public education, and local economic development. And geopark can also offer or knowledge regarding the formation, evolution of the earth that can be used for research, teaching, or reference. And there are also three main components of geopark that are: first, protection and conservation, that's the most important thing, and then tourism-related infrastructural development, socio-economic development using a sustainable territorial development strategy. Geoheritage also refers globally to local features of geology, such as its stratigraphic, mineralogic, paleontologic, and geomorphologic. Also add that beside natural and geological heritage, we can also discuss later about the cultural heritage that this area will offer. Okay, what's the reason we choose this area as a geopark development? So Karang Sambung is a natural laboratory and geologically interesting. We will have more discussion about it later. And this area or this town consists of 30 geoheritage sites with a lot of diversity of rocks. And it's all because this area was before a convergent plate in the form of a subduction path, the Eurasian continental plate with Indian Ocean in the Cretaceous era. So all the rocks that were developed in this subduction area, they were outcropped or appear in this certain area. So, but outside the areas of geoheritage sites, we are also having some cultural activities, cultural heritage that is available also. And the local people also live their life as a usual life, as a gardener or forester and rice fields, and then that do not damage any of the geological sites. I'm going to talk to you about some history of the research of this Karangsambong area, because Indonesia once was a Dutch colony, or colonized by the Netherlands. At 1881, Verbeek and Venema were the first researchers who claim have founded the base rock of Java Island, or we can say the oldest bedrock of Java Island, and then continued in 1933. Halof have done the first geological mapping of this area. And then for our national or our own Indonesian researchers who first researched on this area were after the World War and after the independence of, namely Chia in 1966 and Sukendar Asikin in 1974. Sukendar Asikin was also the first researcher to apply modern plate tectonics theory that were developed in the early 20th century by Alfred Wegener. Okay, I'm going to talk a little about the unique condition of this Karangsambong area. That is, on your left, you can see the tectonostratigraphy of the Luk Ulo area. Luk Ulo is one of the main highlight of this area, because that is the formation which has contained the base rock or the oldest rock of Karangsambong area. And the Luk Ulo melange complex age has been interpreted as to be generated in the subduction zone in around late Cretaceous to Paleocene. And then, as you can see in the tectonostratigraphy by Harsolu Makso in 2016, there are a lot of colors that showed how diverse the area is by seeing that a lot of rock units and a lot of formations are forming over there. Oh, obrigado. And then the shifting of the trend subducting of northeast and southeast, southwest is believed to occur due to involving of a microcontinent also. So until now, this area is still being researched and still have a lot of debate going on between either this is the result of a microplate boundary or the big tectonic plate boundary. And we can also divide this area by the historical geological story that started in the pre-tertiary formation in the early Java base rock, continued by the sedimentation phase of deep sea avalanche. We can also discuss that later, and the ancient volcano phase and structural anticline building and erosion that appears now. So one of the methodology I used that 2 years ago, I've done a geological mapping here with in my bachelor program. So it resulted a geologic map of 1:12,500 scale, which resulted a geomorphological studies, geology studies, petrology, stratigraphically, and as you can see also the cross section over here and this stratigraphical column. I will show you also some mega outcrop that I've been doing that 2 years ago. On your left, it's the outcrop of interbedded chert with red limestone. The unique thing about this outcrop is that usually sedimentary rocks, as you know before, is always deposited horizontally, but as you can see over here, it appeared to be vertically shown. So that means this rock has been through a lot of tectonical activities before. And on your right side, there's also an exotic block outcrop of green schist and mica schist, which aged around 117 million years ago. And this rock also shows that the formation of a schist is usually really deep under the earth crust. It's around 5 to 30 kilometers with a really high temperature. But why is this rock appearing on the surface? So that's the main interesting thing about this area. I would like to continue about how to develop our having a development plan of a geopark. Geopark concept was intended on combining three aspects: biological, geological, and cultural aspect that we're going to discuss later. Geopark concept was introduced by UNESCO as the main area that involved geoheritage sites that has high scientific historical significance, rare, and has an aesthetic value. So there are two important components in development of a geopark by Como. The first one, the area should conceive a few geoheritage sites that have high significance value and historical background towards the specific country or international level. The second one, the historical area should have a strong biological and cultural aspect also. This might be the homework or the next work of this area. We know that this area is really interested in the geological aspect or geoheritage aspect, but in the biological and cultural aspect, they need more on a research on that field of study. I will try to explain also about the geopark development framework, which there are three main components that are really crucial and really important. The first one is heritage conservation. Also, it's the most important one that I've said before: the biological, cultural, and geological heritage conservation, and then the integrated conservation of natural and cultural heritage, non-destructive heritage resource utilization, and it also work with other two components that is also really important. That is also the community development inside. Community is as a main role that we can also work together with them to build such a good work environment to build this geopark together, and then to build a capability of local community, education on heritage. This is very important for the elementary school students and others, so then they will have the knowledge of conserving and they will feel like this area is also owned by together, so they will have a sense of belonging. And then there's also one most important thing, it's economic development, which for your information, Kebumen area is one of the poorest area and weakest economy area in the whole Central Java. So by this geopark development, we hope that we can help the economy of the people over there, because most of them are just rice farmers in the farm. So hopefully in the future we can develop their economy by inviting more tourists to come. I would like to continue about the main components of geopark's evaluation document. Each of them has their own criteria, like geology, landscape, territory, geodiversity, management structure, interpretation, geotourism, and sustainable regional economic development. Each of them has their own weight and score. So this are the list of protected and non-protected geoheritage sites, as you can see. One of them is this also, you have seen before. And then I can also continue to the other side, geoheritage sites, which is the igneous rock. This is the proof that this area also has the diversity of rock. And then this is one of the main attraction. That's the deep sea sediment of chert connected with the below lava. So it really shows the ancient volcano in under the sea that form this outcrop or formation. So I would like to continue also about the cultural heritage diversity in Karang Sambung area, which are around 18 cultural heritage sites. We can see some of them, and then there are the location, coordinate, and information of each cultural heritage on this area. So first of all, there's the Petilasan Puncak Gunung Condong, or you can see the tip of the Condong Mountain. Before, in the ancient era, around 15th century or before, this place used to be a meditation place for the shamanism. And the second one, there's also Makam Mbah Agung Karang Tengah, or we can translate into the holy tomb or sacred tomb of the Mataram Kingdom family. Mataram is one of the biggest Javanese kingdom before. And next one, we have also the Pendopo Adipati Panjer Gunung Bandioro. It is one of the pavilion and the living place of one of the prince of Majapahit Empire also. And then the next one, we have the Tosana Aji Museum of Keris Traditional Weapon. Maybe yesterday you've seen the keris from Professor François' presentation. In this area, we have also the museum of it. And all of this weapon, keris, are all mythical and has a value in it. So it's really of a conventional thinking that this weapon can be some kind of like a magical things. And then there's also a cultural heritage of Batu Tulis Sadang Wetan, which is the engraved rock and inscription by the kingdom era of Indonesia. So by this discussion and presentation, I would like to conclude that Karang Sambung area has been regarded as one of the best geoheritage sites in terms of tourism and scientific research in the world. Geoheritage sites conservation is an important aspect and one of the main objectives of the development strategy for building a geopark area. Geopark concept will consider three main aspects: heritage conservation, economic development, and community involvement. We need to still continue the assessment that were required in order to maintain the performance and protection of the historical value around the geopark area. Even though geoheritage sites of Karang Sambung area are well known, we still need to consider the richness of the cultural heritage that's also available in that area. And there's also maybe one homework for this area. There's not so much research on the biological aspect. So in the future, this must be continued to be researched. Before closing, there is one quote from Albert Heim, a Swiss geologist. He said that gazing at the beautiful nature with its understanding gives much more pleasure and satisfaction rather than just witnessing its beauty. Okay, thank you very much. Muito obrigado. Matur suwun sangat. Thank you very much for your attention.
Can you hear me well right now? Yes? Okay. Sorry, I will keep my mask on because I've been sick in the last few days, and since we all share the same mic, I don't want to like project on here. have a presentation. It's a bit different from everyone, I'm sorry, for today, I mean. And basically, I wanted to study after my holiday in Amsterdam, and Dr. Oosterbeek reached out to us regarding an article on Apheleia on adaptation and transformation. My first time in Amsterdam, I actually noticed that when I was visiting museums or even like some historical places, there was a lot of emphasis on the period of the Little Ice Age, as we call it. And it seems that coincidentally, the golden age of Dutch Republic happened at the same time. So I was like, is there a link there? And what does that, so how did they manage in this very hard times to have a golden age, basically? So first of all, what is Little Ice Age? Little Ice Age is a period of time that is between the mid-1300 and mid-1800, where the climate like did the yo-yo effect. So basically, but overall, the temperature in average went down by 1 degree Celsius, which is major, and it changed a lot of the climate around the world. Obviously, since Little Ice Age seems a bit dramatic, but it's a term that was invented in 1939, by François Mathès, and so now it's a bit controversial to call it Little Ice Age, because nowadays we know that Ice Age is something else than this. But anyway. So just to be sure that we all know where does this come from, basically there are a lot of hypotheses around, but the most common one were that we observed the Sporer and Maunder minimum at this time, which is basically just a reduction of solar activity and solar radiation. Some major volcanic activities also. We all know that volcanoes influence a lot the climate around, and in almost 100 years there were 6 major eruptions during this time that could be in the data, including the Juana Putina in 1600, which is one of the most intense that was observed in the last 2,500 years. That's the volcano that is here. And the last one is the invert of the North Atlantic Oscillation. So basically, this is where the pressure in the ocean is, this is what influences the pressure in the ocean current. And if the ocean current are influenced, then the climate is influenced. Now, a big focus on the European continent, where I will bring you shortly. So basically, this whole climate change brought like long and hard winters and short and not fresh like summers. And this had major problem because a lot of, like, back at the time, maritime commerce, for example, was very important. And if you had long winters with like major glacier blocking the ways and all this, like exploration, it was very hard. Also, bear in mind also its climate. So don't think that it was -1 degree for the whole time. It varies a lot. Like so basically you could have a good year and then after that a bad year. So bear in mind this. And but the major problem there was that the agriculture was a lot threatened in many regions in Europe. And so if you have bad agriculture, you may have ill-nourished populations. And if your population is weak, then your population is vulnerable, more vulnerable to epidemic, you have a lot of mortality. You can even have social rebellions a lot, because we all know that survival is part of this influence a lot on your social on the social aspects, basically. But also a less dramatic consequence could be also the apparition of the art, the winter art, that you can observe a lot, for example, in London or in British Museum, in National Gallery, sorry, and in the Rijksmuseum. So now I'm going to the République des Provinces Unies, so the Dutch Republic at the time, so it's the French name. And so basically, like I said at the beginning, I was interested in like, how come that they are so proud of this period, and how come that they had this golden age? And especially that in my head, I was like, they should have been the more attacked by it, because most of the territory of the Dutch Republic is full of like water, it's canals, it was like fabricated as well, because they are the same level of the sea. So why this much like pride around this? So then I discovered, like when I was doing research and also through the Rijksmuseum, like some that were there. So basically, I did some research obviously on the climate, but also I read, like back in the days, I read the book of Jared Diamond, which is like Collapse. It's how a society choose to fail or not. How society, sorry, I read it in French, so the English title is not my good. How a society choose to survive or not. And I was like, okay, so maybe they search certain ways to overcome this big major disadvantage that they had regarding this sea level thing. And I also found the writing of an ambassador, an English ambassador that was in La Haye at the time, and he commented a lot on this great period of the Dutch Republic. And this is how I found some adaptations that projected them into as the forthcoming nation over France, over England, over the major empire that you might think of first when you think about European empires. So, first of all, we need to consider in the data that there is the destiny, let's say, that is influence a lot your response to climate, in the sense of that climate, even if you have the same phenomenon throughout a continent, it will affect differently some people, because if the wind change from north to south in one region, it means that the other one changed from south to north, and then which one is disadvantage between the two? So that's the thing, is that, and Diamond says it well. It's like if certain societies manage to do it and others collapse, one of the reasons is also the difference of environment than society, and those environments are influenced by this climate. So that was the major advantage of the Dutch Republic at the time, because basically when the wind changed because of all this North Atlantic oscillation and whatever, the wind changed in their favor, so they could bring their boats way further and way faster than the England, for example, for exploration, for maritime commerce, and for a war even. And they use this advantage to basically learn how to overcome their weakness regarding, for example, the maritime war, the naval war against England. And this is how they managed to basically, after the 1700, when it really touched them, 1600, that was the major period for them. After that, they managed to learn and to study those climate change, and this is how they managed to win 2 times against the England, for example, in naval war, and dominated this major. I say England because that was the main naval supremacy at the time. Oh yeah, and also the thing is, like I said, the territory of the Dutch Republic is very much fabricated in a way. So it's not it wasn't natural like this, like we built it. So the thing is, the population already there had a major diversity of regimes. Basically, they were not only solely based on agriculture like you could find in France. They had fish, they had agriculture obviously, but they had also cheese. Before this whole problem came, they were already well diverse. So that was one also major thing, is that already in their habits, they had this, they were not solely based on agriculture. So the fact that agriculture, for example, was affected, it's bad, but it's not as bad as some other nation, because after that, when the other nations were affected, like France, they had to ask from the Dutch for food reserves. So basically the Dutch were the ones that would bring the food, like the food that was for example, if your quota wasn't meet during the winter, they would bring it to you. So it created a dependence in a way that was a good commerce, let's say, for them. Also, the society. The thing is, this society, and I used mostly William Temple on this one, is that it seems like once, a monk in Amsterdam, wrote something like, this winter is so harsh, people are dying, this is God punishing us for our sins. But after that, after you ask yourself, God is punishing us, but you don't do anything, people are still dying. So there was this kind of bring up of the entire society of not resting on just God is punishing us and we just won't do anything. So they started to have this way of wanting to change stuff and to basically create by themselves. So a certain humanism and les Lumières could be seen in this, in the sense that William Temple observed that Holland is a country where profit is more in the request than honor. He's an Englishman, so that's his way of saying this. But basically, it's we can observe that in this society, no matter who you are, if you are an immigrant, if you're not male, I must say, because women at the time, no, but if you are an immigrant, if you are a noble or a poor person, you can still change the society. Basically, you can still basically, if you want to do enterprise companies, build your own little thing, you can do it. And this was something that was a bit in his writing, Temple was a bit ooh, no. But yeah. Also, he also observed that charity seems very national among them. It means that basically we don't leave people starve and die. Charity is very important, and you can see the data as well, or the archives, is that they will make sure that their population is eating, that their population is have the bare minimum. So there was this whole mentality, I would say. in the Dutch Republic that helped as well, but that was already there basically, that helped as well them to strive during this time. So it's so, but now I can make some detailed adaptation examples as well that are more material, let's say. So during that time, we changed the adaptations to, so we adapted to that climate. So basically, like I said, the winter blocks the ways, like blocks the water. It's a maritime country. The thing is, this land was already full of water because, like I said, they were on the same level, sea level. But these windmills, they managed to so basically they had windmills to pump the water out of those lands so that they could cultivate them. So those windmills were still here, but they were not massively. But then in 1600 and 1700, they started to build all of them. So basically this technology that they already had was very useful for now, because when you arrive in the summer, even if it's fresh, when you have all this glacier and all the snow and all this that comes and melt here, you can pump it out, basically. So they already had this knowledge. Also, the thing is the water mills, I don't know if it's water mills in English, but it's water mills. They are blocked obviously in the ice. So you can't make function of your enterprise or whatever, like little artisan you are. So having already the knowledge of switching from water mills to windmills is a win-win. And now it became also the symbol of the Netherlands, obviously, nowadays. So it's very interesting. And you can observe those windmills either in rural or in urban. So there's a circulation of the knowledge as well on the land. Oops. Okay, also another example that I can talk to you about is the icebreaker. So obviously the icebreaker was not invented by the Dutch, don't misquote me, but they perfected the technology basically. And they used them to open the way for the maritime maritime commerce. And in Amsterdam, you can observe massive of them. This is a maquette from the Rijksmuseum. This one, for example, was used to basically, it was not only opening the way, it was also breaking the ice so that those massive ice cube could be kept in cellars and then sold to be drinking water. Because remember that if you have like those problems of like climate and all this, the drinking water can become quite difficult to find, or pure water can be difficult to find. But with the ice, you have a good drinking water. So they also use this as like survival, and also they adapted to that. And finally, you have the chasse à la baleine, so whale hunting. And so in this one, they used to put like, so they understood that the ice was blocking at they were in the Svalbard, basically. Yeah, okay. So basically they were like, they had to hunt those whales in the sea directly. So they adapted to that, and they decided to, for hunting them, they would use the technologies instead of having oven on the ice of Svalbard, they could directly do them in the boat. So to burn the oil, bring it back to Amsterdam, and then use the oil to heat up houses. And they were put in big rooms, basically, to have the oil so that the oil could be distributed and could heat up houses. So, yeah. So, in conclusion, the Dutch Republic managed to basically work out this problem of the Little Ice Age by literally just using some technologies or some knowledge that they had and adapted to and had already this mentality of let's create stuff. Let's not stay here and just do nothing. And basically they managed to create this whole empire that was a golden age for during the hardest of time for a European continent, let's say, climate talking, of course. So thank you.
Thank you all for your nice presentations, but I have a question for Eve. So far we know Indonesia is very diverse for geological and cultural heritages. You mentioned a new site for geopark, and as we know, in 2015 there is a geopark in Indonesia, in Java, Gunung Siu. Maybe I pronounced wrong, but you proposed a new site. What is the main difference of both sites? How, as a novice or as a geotourist, I prefer your site rather than an established site? Thank you.
I have a question for Krina. Did the population simultaneously adapt the cultural practices from these different countries to which they were attached? And has the adaptation process affect their habits and customs? Thank you.
I have also a question for Krina. I wanted to know if the Gagos people, they were feeling part, because maybe I didn't understand, but does they feeling part of the Moldavian people, or do they see themselves as a different community?
I've got a lot of questions. I'm gonna start with Krina. Does a Moldovan state recognize specific rights to the Gagauz? And if you can, the linguistic aspect is important to determine the origin of an ethnic group. So I just want you to reply to the question, which linguistic family belongs the Gagauz tongue to?
Okay. To Isadora, I'd like to know if there's a process of gentrification, if the inhabitants of the villages are being expelled in order to create more space for touristic complex and hostels and everything.
Just a question.
Okay, thank you very much, Rajib, for your great question. Actually, this is not, I'm not proposing a new geoheritage site or development of geopark site, a new one. No, I'm not even proposing any new one. So this site has been regarded as the Karangsambung Karangbolong National Geopark, KKNG. So it was already developed by the government to have also the UNESCO label, but until now, they're still developing and they're still having a lot of task assignments to do that I mentioned in my presentation before, that there are some from the cultural heritage, they haven't managed it well. Like, for example, the infrastructure, it's not really well built over there. So there are still some assignment to do. And also in the biological aspect, they haven't been a lot of research in that particular field of study. So there's still a lot of been going on, but this Karangsambung Geopark that we discussed before, is also already have been, I think around 50 or more years has been regarded as the national geopark. But we are proposing to be the World Heritage UNESCO site. Yes. UNESCO Geopark, I mean. I haven't known more about that. Maybe it's still in an aspiring category. Yes. And then for the other question about Gunung Sewu, I haven't heard more about it, but I've done some field work over there, being the assistant field lecturer over there. So it's also very interesting to be developed. It's a karstic environment, but then still a lot of things to do because not all the infrastructure and the access to the sites of heritage is easy for the tourists to come. Does that answer the question? Okay, thank you.
So I will start to answer the first question. So if I understood well, your question is about the social practices of Gagauz people and if they took some practices from the countries that are around, like Moldova, Ukraine, right? So yes, they do. Actually, I mentioned that their heritage is between Orthodoxy and Turkic origins. So basically, that means that a lot of religious celebrations are the same as to Moldovan people, because Moldovan people, they are Christian Orthodox as well. And they managed to keep their heritage of those Turkic origins. As we could see, the Gagauz language and as well some practices related to their Turkic origins, like worship of some animals. So yes, they could adapt during some historical periods to keep their heritage. So the second question, if Gagauz people see them different or not, right, Charlene? So they see them different. For example, when you ask a Gagauz person, where are you from? So first of all, he will say, I'm Gagauz, I'm from Moldova. He will not answer, I'm Moldovan, I'm from Moldova, but I have my ethnic of Gagauz. You see, here's the answer. And yes, and sometimes it's really difficult because they see themselves different. For example, for making this EU path, Because Gagauz people, they love as well Russian people. So here's a lot of problems. But yeah, here's a lot to discuss about this. Yeah, the third question after that, okay, just the question that I have. So the specific rights for the Gagauz people. Yes, I mentioned that they have their autonomous territorial unit of Gagauz since 1994. And with this autonomous unit, they have the lawmaking powers within its own jurisdiction. Also, they have their Bashkan. It's like the governor of Gagauzia. So also they have their assembly of Gagauz people. Actually, they do things about their economy, about their culture. So yes, they have a lot of rights. But as well, it's important to mention that they have this external self-determination. For example, I hope that you understood the history about the Greater Romania, that Moldova was part of Romania. And we could have this again when the USSR, when it happened, the dissolution of USSR. But the Gagauz people were very, very afraid about this. So that's why they even asked for this autonomy. And for example, they have this self-determination. And if one day, let's say, I don't know, 5 years, or something like that, Moldova decides to be part of Romania, Gagauz people, they have the right to say that they stay with their autonomy. So, yeah. And again, your question about the Gagauz language. So Gagauz language is a part of family of Turkic languages, like Azerbaijan language, Turkish language. For example, you could check on YouTube and to see there's a lot of videos about this, even the similarities about Turkish language, Azerbaijan language, even some Turkish people, when they travel to Gagauzia, they see that there's so many similarities. They could understand each other without problems. So yes, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you for your question, Jo. Yes, there is a gentrification process. There are 3 main cities around the national park. The first one, closest to Brasilia and Goiânia, and where most people come to visit, is Alto Paraíso. Alto Paraíso was the first one to start developing, and nowadays almost none of the people who work in Alto Paraíso live in Alto Paraíso. People used to live in Vila de São Jorge, which is the one closest to the entry of the national park, or in Cavalcante, which is where the Kalunga community is based. But now, after also the improvement of the road that links Alto Paraíso and Vila de São Jorge, people started visiting more Vila de São Jorge, and it's the place where most famous people started going to. So now Vila de São Jorge didn't used to, 5 years ago, they didn't used to have even cemented pavements. It was just dirt, and really simple constructions. And now there are modern luxury hotels and new Airbnb houses. And then the people who used to live in Vila de São Jorge are living in a farther city called Colinas do Sul. And now the people who used to frequent Vila de São Jorge are also going to Colinas do Sul. And then Colinas do Sul is starting to get like Vila de São Jorge used to be before. But Cavalcante is still a bit more untouched because the access is still a bit harder. Thank you.
Regarding the Gagauz language, because nobody asked about which are the official languages in Gagauzia. But that's really important. So we have, of course, Gagauz language, you have Russian language, and you have Romanian language. But the problem is when you go to Gagauzia and you ask someone, a Gagauz person in Romanian something, that person will, oh, I don't speak Moldovan. But attention, there is no Moldavian language. It was the propaganda of USSR to, how to say, to keep us apart from Romania and with possible unit of great Romania. So that's really important. And also something really important is that, as I already mentioned, Gagauz people, they were really very well Russificated. And they do speak a lot of Russian. And even they speak more Russian than their own language, Gagauz language. So that's why Gagauz language is on the list of endangered languages. So now Gagauz people, they have really to rethink about their linguistic heritage.
Okay, no, you cannot. Anyone else? Okay, I'll do very fast some observations. I'll do it in the order of what I have here. Alicia, I think you did a very interesting, also, I think you have an interesting line of research, sometimes a little bit too deterministic, but I think you are doing interesting research. I like that. But one important recommendation, when it's 10 minutes, it's 10 minutes. Some of you no, but this is to be assessed negatively, okay? This is important for all of you to keep in mind. In the case of Karina, no major comments, except I think our task in academia is always to think, okay, when we get to an understanding, what if we are wrong or what have we not looked at yet? So all the discourse is about the Gagauz and the Moravians, whatever. And what about internal divisions in the Gagauz, apart from the political aspect that you mentioned? In the case of Isadora, it's very interesting because I have observations on the section on Isadora which do not relate to your paper, but I do remember. No, because I noted something from him in your books. The question of I know Alto Paraíso and the region, and I think on one hand, yes, it's very beautiful and so on. On the other hand, it's the elite. So it's the elite. It's people with money coming from the outside. To what extent is you touch this? Maybe you can in the text go further in dipping into the contradictory aspects of the process. In the case of Margarita, I didn't really see the community-based practices. You mentioned slightly the issue of fishermen, but it looked like everything being top-down directed. So maybe in the text, go back to that. And in the case of Eve, it's also a little bit the same thing, but the community involvement was not so clear for me, and which is something important for geoparks. Having said this, congratulations to all of you, and let's have a coffee.
presentations of the next session?
All the last presentations should be put there now, before coffee.
Hello everyone, this is Yujia. At first, I'd like to thank Professor Louis Osterbeek for being my supervisor and giving me help. Today I'm going to talk about community participation in historic urban landscapes management in China with the case study of Pingyao Ancient City. As you can see in the map, Pingyao, as a World Heritage Site since 1997, is a walled city in central Shanxi, northeast of China. The flag is the situation. And famed for its importance in Chinese economic history, its well-preserved Ming and Qing, the last two dynasties, urban planning and architecture, as well as the most well-preserved city in the Han ethnic settlements area of China. And the picture is the map of the construction. Here are some photos of the city, and you can see that here is a symmetrical square construction. There are lots of traditional elements like red lanterns and the walls and the wooden house. So first of all, let's go to the context. The problem is that we are facing integrative developmental challenges of rapid urbanization and natural disasters worldwide. And as for the academic scope, there are two. First, the concept of a historic urban landscape, HUL, in Vienna Memorandum in 2005. And the most important is that the new management approaches offered by UNESCO 2011 recommendation on the historic urban landscape. And the last is the success of community participation in urban theories and practices in Europe and America as a good guidance and the leading role. As for the methodology, with the guidance of UNESCO HUL approach, and I take the Ballarat imagine method, that's to say a professor has taken in an Australian city, Ballarat. And we have taken initiatives of a mode of co-construction of Pingyao. The field survey and the forums and workshops are taken integratively and to test the participatory willingness and the multi-party responsibilities and suggestions for the four parties engaged in this historic urban landscape management to get to the Chinese contextualized community participation. And so there are the precise questions. The local people are proposed with the three general questions. First, what do you love in the city? And the second, what do you want to retain? And the last, what would you like to change? The three Ballarat Imagine questions were well established to identify local contexts and their willingness to be engaged in the future, moving beyond built heritage to covering the whole local environment of urban landscape, like intangible attributes of the local areas. And because the world is so big and there are numerous people and streets and buildings, so the group field survey and multi-party forum are essential approaches in this practice. During the group field survey, participants answered 7 precise questions one by one to discuss their willingness to be engaged and also how future local participatory practices could be conducted. For the discussions, in China, urban heritage practices mainly occur in 3 main phases: identification, programming, and execution. And the problems exist in the last 2 steps normally. And the real problem is that the 4 parties engaged in the process take their positions totally different. Local decision makers have predominant power leading decision-making processes. And also the local residents are huge and their competences to participate in the management is really imbalanced. And then the private firms always take profit-oriented operation models. The last is it's difficult for experts to coordinate between the 3 other parts. But however, during the process, we have explored some sustainable initiatives. The three parts. First is the preservation of built heritage. The government has led the restoration of traditional houses and streets in respect of their characteristics. And the cultural events are the most successful, the first, the Pingyao International Film Festival and the Pingyao International Photography Competition, and also the Chinese New Year Exposition and the circumstantial experience place for tourists. That's to say, the city are not simply rely on the restoration, the hotellerie, just the country has explored the extensive success, that's to say, cultural tourism mode. And last of all, we do not forget the intangible cultural heritage. We take the branding and industrialization of lacquer work and metro vinegar. And there are some photos. The first is the International Film Festival, and the second is the substantial experience place and the lacquer work and the traditional hotellerie. In conclusion, since UNESCO 2011 HUL recommendation, there have been increasing demands, theories, and practices of bottom-up decision-making in urban development planning worldwide. And it is a really productive attempt to bring heritage studies to the mainstream of urban planning. Effective and wide community consultation is key to balancing Chinese government-led methodology to be more inclusive and community-based. But it is better to combine the scientific methodology with the special different national context. Apart from the platform, in Chinese community practice, a legal requirement is further needed to make local governments integrate public feedback and interest continuously. And thanks for your attention.
Good morning, everybody. It's Hasna from Diklam, and I will do my presentation in French, so let's switch language. Bonjour tout le monde. Aujourd'hui, j'ai le plaisir de présenter devant vous mon essai intitulé La ville de Agadir après le séisme de 1960, reconstruction, transformation et adaptation. Dans le cadre de la thématique de ce séminaire, je tiens par la même occasion de remercier M. Osterbeck d'avoir supervisé mon essai et remercier également mon amie Leila, originaire de la ville de Agadir, qui m'a beaucoup aidée durant ma recherche. Ok. Premièrement, les catastrophes naturelles présentent une menace pour l'humanité. Et on ne peut qualifier une catastrophe naturelle en tant qu'elle si et seulement si cette dernière est produite dans un territoire habité et exploité par l'homme. Il existe plusieurs types de catastrophes naturelles, à savoir les tremblements de terre, les glissements de terrain, les inondations, les éruptions volcaniques et les tempêtes. Et aussi les traditions et les pratiques culturelles peuvent être bouleversées à cause de ces catastrophes et ils peuvent changer d'aspect ou bien avoir une disparition définitive. En ce qui concerne le Maroc, il est situé dans une région très active sismique et dans une région sismique très active et il a connu durant son histoire plusieurs tremblements de terre. Notamment en 1755, où il a connu un tremblement de terre qui a détruit la plupart des villes côtières. Aussi, en 1960, la ville d'Agadir a connu un tremblement de terre qui était le plus mortier dans l'histoire du Maroc. Pour situer géographiquement la ville de Agadir, cette ville côtière du Maroc se trouve au sud-ouest marocain. Elle est située sur la côte atlantique, dans la région de Sousse, à 508 km au sud de Casablanca, à 548 km de la capitale du Maroc et à 235 km de la ville de Marrakech. Donc, la population locale de cette ville sont des amazirophones. Ils parlent la langue amazigh. Et cette ville, elle est considérée parmi les villes les plus touristiques du territoire marocain. Et son port, il est le premier au Maroc et le premier port sardinier au monde. En ce qui concerne la méthodologie que j'avais suivie pendant ma recherche, je me suis basée sur une recherche bibliographique et obographique. Il s'agissait d'une examination de différentes études qui ont été réalisées sur la ville d'Agadir, à savoir une consultation aussi des différents rapports et des projets qui ont été, des projets de développement qui ont été faits là-bas. Pour ce qui est des données principales de mon article, j'ai donné des informations générales sur la ville de Agadir avant et après le séisme. J'ai parlé d'un projet très intéressant qui est le projet de réhabilitation de l'Aqsba de Agadir Apheleia, qui était dans l'ancienne ville qui a été totalement détruite à cause du tremblement de terre et qui constitue la mémoire collective de la communauté locale des Gadiri. Et j'ai également intégré dans mon article un aspect de pratique culturelle, d'aspect religieux, en parlant d'un sanctuaire qui est considéré comme un gardien de la ville qui s'appelle le sanctuaire de Sidi Bouknadel. Donc, pour donner des informations générales sur la gravité de séisme que la ville a subi, elle était d'une magnitude de 5,7 sur l'échelle de Richter. Il a duré seulement 15 secondes, mais elle a entraîné la perte de vie entre 12 000 et 15 000 d'individus. Parmi cette population, seulement 25 000 qui ont été survécus, on peut dire. Mais toute la ville historique a été ruinée, notamment les quartiers qui ont été proches de la montagne. Seulement le port et la base navale qui ont pu résister à ce tremblement et qui ont servi par la suite à abriter les gens qui ont survécu cette catastrophe. Donc la reconstruction de la nouvelle ville a été faite, à 2 km au sud de l'ancienne ville, le 30 juin 1960. Il a été lancé par le feu Mohamed V, le roi du Maroc. Et par la suite, son prince, il a continué le contrôle il était responsable des opérations qui ont suivi, notamment la création du Haut Commissariat à la reconstruction de la ville d'Agadir, par l'action conjuguée aussi du département de l'urbanisme et la participation de certains architectes du mouvement moderne en architecture, comme Le Corbusier. Et donc, des années plus tard, notamment pendant les années 2000, les responsables de la ville ont créé un musée pour commémorer ce drame. Ils ont fait une exposition des photos de la ville avant et après le tremblement de terre. Et aussi, ils ont exposé certains témoignages des gens qui ont survécu cette catastrophe. En ce qui concerne le projet de réhabilitation de l'Aqsba de Agadir Apheleia, tout d'abord, l'Aqsba, c'est une citadelle qui se trouve à l'ancien emplacement de la ville de Agadir. Avant le tremblement de terre, il a été complètement détruit à cause de ça. Et c'est le seul lien physique qui lie l'ancienne ville d'Agadir et le passé de la communauté locale. La Société de développement régional du tourisme de Sousse a veillé sur la réhabilitation du site avec la participation des Ma'allem. Les Ma'allem sont les maîtres artisans qui maîtrisent bien les techniques de restauration des monuments historiques. Et aussi, il y avait des travaux de fouilles archéologiques qui ont été effectués dans ce site par une équipe maroco-espagnole. Ceci est une photo de la Kasbah qui se trouve dans une colline. Juste à côté, il y a une photo du chantier de la réhabilitation et tout en bas, les photos du chantier de fouilles archéologiques qui a été effectué par des archéologues de l'Institut national des sciences de l'archéologie et du patrimoine à Rabat et une équipe d'archéologues espagnols. Là, c'est une restitution 3D des différentes investigations archéologiques préventives qui ont été réalisées dans une partie de cette Kasbah. Et il y avait aussi une inclusion de la communauté locale en prenant en considération leur avis, leurs témoignages et en se basant sur la tradition orale des gens qui ont survécu le drame pour bien restituer le passé. Et c'était l'association Isoran, présidée par un homme originaire de la ville de Agadir et qui représentait la communauté locale. Il a fait des propositions dans ce projet. Il a proposé, en vue de devoirs de mémoire, des planches qui devraient reprendre le dessin des ruelles, du tissu disparu aussi, et aussi l'architecte Selim Naji, avec son équipe travaillant sur la restauration, ils ont essayé d'établir un bon dosage des gestes adéquats pour respecter l'histoire et ne rien changer, en intégrant aussi l'importance du paysage et de la nature pour la bonne gestion du site après son ouverture, et en menant une approche plurielle et participative qui engage la population locale pour la bonne restitution de l'histoire des monuments historiques qui existent là-dedans. Et c'était cette année que l'Aqsba de Agadir Oufla a été réouverte pour la première fois devant la communauté locale, après le lancement du téléphérique en mois de juillet. Et aussi, l'Aqsba de Agadir Oufla a bénéficié d'une programmation culturelle durant le Nouvel An Amazigh 2973, qui coïncide chaque année avec le 12 janvier et qui symbolise le premier jour du calendrier agraire. C'est une photo du show musical qui a été effectué dans l'Aqsba par un groupe qui s'appelle Jouban Touja. Passons maintenant au sanctuaire de Sidi Bouknadel, ou bien le gardien de la ville de Agadir, comme il est conçu dans la mémoire collective de la communauté locale. Ce dernier se situe dans une situation géographique stratégique à l'entrée de la ville, et juste à côté de l'ancienne Qsba qui a été détruite et du port. Donnant vue sur la mer, il reste parmi les saints les plus glorifieux de la région de Sousse. Il a été classé monument historique en 1922 durant le protectorat français. Et il a longtemps considéré comme le gardien de la ville. Il est nommé Sidi Bouknadel, ou bien l'homme aux lanternes. C'est l'image du militantisme pour la population locale, et il occupe une place symbolique dans leur imaginaire collectif. Donc, il a subi une destruction à cause du tremblement de terre, et cette destruction a entraîné des changements au niveau des célébrations du Moussem, qui veut dire une ressemblance annuelle qui se faisait chaque année dans ce sanctuaire. Mais aujourd'hui, certaines personnes fréquentent toujours le sanctuaire pour leur rendre visite de ce lieu sacré pour eux. Ils ont continué à pratiquer certains rituels qui étaient pratiqués à cette occasion. C'est le fait de donner des offrandes et de sacrifier des animaux comme des moutons, etc. Après, ils donnent à manger pour les pauvres. Il y a des gens qui fréquentent aussi le lieu pour bénéficier de la baraka de ce saint. La baraka signifie la bénédiction, et pour la résolution des problèmes ou bien pour guérir des maladies incurables et donner aux femmes mariées qui n'ont pas d'enfants la possibilité d'une grossesse. Et pour les habitants de la région, ce sanctuaire il est toujours ouvert, mais les visites s'effectuaient principalement le vendredi. Et les habitants de la région ont maintenu la tradition du moussim, même après le tremblement de terre. Ils ont continué à organiser ce moussim tous les 15 mois du mois de Shaban, dans le calendrier islamique de chaque année. Et cette date doit coïncider avec un jeudi, sinon ils doivent reporter le moussim pour le jeudi d'après. Donc, en guise de conclusion, on peut dire que le tremblement de terre présente une menace radicale contre l'ordre culturel et social dans son existence, sa dimension spatiale et temporelle, qui se présente dans la perte d'un patrimoine culturel, un patrimoine architectural ou bien d'une mémoire collective d'une communauté. La ville d'Agadir est renée après le séisme avec tous les projets de reconstruction et de développement touristique qui ont été faits là-bas. Agadir aujourd'hui, c'est les constructions modernes, c'est la dynamique économique, sociale et même culturelle qui s'est beaucoup développée après sa reconstruction. Et la population de la ville reste toujours attachée avec son passé perdu et elle a toujours cette volonté de le restituer. Et le gouvernement a adopté une politique culturelle qui a engagé la communauté locale dans la restitution du passé de l'histoire de la ville d'Agadir. Et ce sont les sources bibliographiques et webographiques que j'ai utilisées pour la rédaction de cet essai. Thank you for your attention. 10 minutes.
Okay, so hello everyone. My name is Iman Hoja, and just next to Morocco, we're moving on to Algeria. And my work consists of tracing the logic behind the architectural and urban practices that are adopted by the Mozambique community and that mainly derive from their social dynamics and their ideology. So the Mozambiques are an Amazon community that live in the Mzab Valley in the northern Algerian Sahara. They are known for their strong adherence to Ibadism, a branch of Islam that is known for emphasizing community solidarity, economic self-sufficiency, and social justice. Mozabit descend from the Ibadit Restamid dynasty that reigned in central Maghreb, which means Algeria, and they were driven out of their capital, and so they took refuge in the Mzab Valley, which its geographical isolation and inhospitality constituted a shelter for the Mozabites against any external invasion. The Mda Valley is composed of 7 fortified villages that are called Qsor, Qsor in singular, and these Qsor are recognized as UNESCO World Heritage Sites since 1982. Mozabits designed the Qsor to be easily defensible, building them on hills with high ramparts and narrow alleys that made them difficult for attackers to penetrate. These Qsor constitute an exceptional testimony to a model of spatial organization that perfectly adapts to the traditions and the lifestyle of the population as well as to the environment. For this study, I started with doing a comparison between Mozabit architecture and the social dynamics and beliefs of the community that led me to establishing interpretations that link the two. Given that Bnei Mzabs or Mozabit are a community that values social ties, economic self-sufficiency in education and religion, the main three spaces that significantly illustrate how the ideology influences the architecture are the market, the mosque, and the house. Starting with the mosque, this one is built on the highest point of the Qsar, around which settle all the houses. And just like the houses of the Qsar, Mozabit's lives also revolve around the mosque because it's the place where educational, religious, and social activities are held. In Qsar, we can only find one big mosque, and this is an action that aims to bring all the residents of the Qsar around the same social and religious activities. The architecture of the mosque, same as all Mozabit constructions, is rigid, simple, and bare of any signs of flashiness or excessive decoration. This is due to the Ibadi faith that educates people on simplicity, subsistence, and equality. Moving to the houses, in a Mozabit house, all the rooms on the ground floor are open to a central covered patio. This is a gesture that seeks to reinforce family ties and allow more interactions between family members. A Mozabit house has to obey to two main Ibadi principles. The first is the principle of equality, and the second is the principle of the non-exhibition of any sign of superiority. So as a result, in a Mozabit neighborhood, all houses are 2 stories, and so they all adopt the same appearance and morphology. This allows the provision of equal sunlight to all houses and gives the Qsar a homogeneous, compact appearance. One more thing to notice about Mozabit neighborhoods is that 2 houses can never have 2 opposite doors or 2 opposite windows to avoid vis-a-vis, and this is due to the introverted character of the Mozabits and their value of intimacy. And lastly, the market. Mozabits are known to be very good, very skilled merchants, so that's because their economy mainly lies on trading and business. However, the market is always located outside the ramparts of the Qsar in order to avoid non-residents or foreign merchants to enter the Qsar, so to maintain the security and the intimacy of the Qsar. As a conclusion, I'd like to say that this concern of the Mozabites to maintain their heritage mainly stems from their religious beliefs and their ideology that were developed due to the historical circumstances the community has lived. But however, to do so, the Mozabit community has to have been long renouncing on political power and all kinds of opportunities that would mean the diminution of their culture. So basically, all this falls into a series of sacrifices and concessions that the Mozabit community has been doing for centuries. Thank you.
Hi all, good morning. My name is Mariana Branco. I'm a Diploma Master's student, and today I'm going to present to you the favelas of Brazil as a symbol of resilience, creativity, and I will present a study case of community-based initiatives for transformation. So my article was made based on a My article was made based on exploratory research with a literature review and a case study. In my article, and today I'm going to bring briefly an introduction. I will talk about the history of the favelas, where they came from. I will say about favelas as community, landscapes, and heritage. And the case study that I'm bringing today is the NGO Teto as community-based practices. So, a brief introduction. What are the favelas? The favelas are the slums of Brazil. They are informal settlements that are characterized by poverty, inequality, and social exclusion, and they are present today in most of Brazilian cities, and they have become emblematic in the landscape of the cities. Beside this negative part, that is the poverty, the inequality, and today we have also the drug traffic control in mostly of the favelas. We have these communities are also vibrant, they are dynamic, that are rich in culture, creativity, and resilience. The lack of government investment has led the favelas and the community's inhabitants to develop their own unique social norms and forms of governance that reflect their cultural tradition and the values of the communities that lives there. And today they also have local leaders to work in those new governments in the communities. NGOs, a lot of NGOs does works in the favelas, and one example of them is Teto, that work to enhance the living of those that habit in the favelas. And Teto promotes community-based practice. Teto looks to empower the residents to participatory approaches and decision-making. A little bit of the history of the favelas in Brazil. The favelas, they began once Brazil had its rapidly industrialization. So at the end of the 19th century, Brazil experienced a massive influx of migrants and minority groups that were excluded from the formal urban economy and from the citizenships and political system. They went to the big cities to look for work, and we are talking about minority groups. These minority groups is in this beginning of the history that the favelas has been forgotten by the government. These minority groups, they went to find housings in this big city, so they went to hillsides of the cities, they went to the margin of the rivers that were places that people should not build on it because it's not proper place to build. It's the place where the land is not proper to be built on, and so it should be an area to be preserved. But it was the area where these people that were excluded from the governance found a place to live. So the history of favela is closely tied to Brazil's history of social inequality and rapid urbanization. And what we see today is this result of people living in the hillsides of Brazil and next to the rivers. Here I'm bringing two photos of examples. The photo in our left is the example of São Paulo. In the photo in the right is the example of Rio de Janeiro. These are the two biggest cities of Brazil, but these two photos, they are quite emblematic to show the landscape that we have in the right side, and also the inequality that we have in the left side. In the left side, we have the favela of Paraisópolis, right next to a high-end building in São Paulo, in Morumbi. Morumbi, it's a high-end neighborhood, so we can see a lot of the density of the favelas and the difference between the two areas. As the government didn't invest in these areas, the community itself started to organize themselves, but before this organization, we have also the negative side that was the drug traffic control on it. Mostly of the favelas today in Brazil, it's controlled by drug lords. And to communicate between this drug traffic control and to gain voice in this area, these informal systems of governance has become more formalized. So we have now local leaders inside of the communities and other forms of collective actions. And favelas today, they have their own unique cultural and tradition, including music, dance, and food. And it's pretty recent, but from not long time ago, it has been growing recognition of the value and importance as cultural heritage site. This part of the music, the food, the dance is really important because it's all the Brazilians' most famous music, food, dance come from the poorest areas of Brazil. And in 2012, UNESCO has designated Rio de Janeiro Carioca landscapes between the mountain and the sea as World Heritage Site. But the favelas, they are not specifically mentioned on the text of the listing, but in the pyramids that encompassed in the area, there are favelas there. And the criteria that UNESCO used was the criteria 5 and 6, which are the human settlements and the tradition. So it's something that is a bit problematic that it was not mentioned, the favelas specifically, and those people were not highlighted in the text, because you cannot separate one thing from another. You cannot separate the culture from the landscape. You cannot separate the favelas in the landscape of Brazil, in those urban areas, of course. So what is TETO? TETO is an NGO that is present in Latin America, in, I believe, 18 countries of Latin America. TETO was born in Chile, and today in Brazil is present in 6 states of Brazil. And the main goal of TETO is to improve the life of those living in favelas, promoting community-based practice and empowering residents through participatory approaches and decision-making. One important point and one important topic of TETO is that TETO is an NGO, but TETO does not do charity. It's not a top-bottom initiative. TETO works for the community and not to, TETO works with the community and not for the community. So if the community is not involved in the work, there is no work. The main goal of TETO today, the mission of TETO, is to create a just society without poverty. So TETO mobilizes volunteers to work side by side with residents and local communities of Brazil. And TETO has a few construction work. TETO works in the community to do gardens, community centers, but the main work that the NGO is more known today is the emergency housing. So we can see here this house, this wood house in the middle of the image is one of the houses that TETO work. One important thing to say is that TETO works only in precarious favelas. So we see in the previous photos here, for example, in those houses, we can see brick houses. And this is not the type of favelas that TETO works on. TETO works in the favelas that doesn't have a water system, that has little to no electric system, and in precarious favelas, so is the houses that are built with the remaining of civil construction, with the remaining of wood, of civil construction. So the work of TETO, the main work is working during the weekends to do mobilization to build those type of housing. So the houses are made out of wood. It's open in the soil, in the terrain. It opens a good structure in the terrain, so we can resist to rains and flooding. And TETO impacts today until December of 2021. TETO already has built more than 4,000 emergency houses in Brazil. So, as conclusion, is that favelas should be recognized and celebrated as valuable cultural heritage sites, and those community-based practice and initiatives, they are key to adapt and transform the favelas into more livable and sustainable states. And TETO and other community-based organizations today, they play an important role in addressing challenges faced by favelas, promoting community-based practice, and empowering residents through participatory approaches and decision-making. Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Wang Qianzi from the Clan Plus. Today, I want to present a study of community involvement in the Westlake cultural landscape of Hangzhou in the pre-epidemic area with the perspective of the HUL. First, I want to thank to my supervisor, Mr. Zhang Rouran, for tolerating me and my paper. And first, I want to explain my definition of the community in my paper. Community for heritage is broadly defined to include local, national, or international groups or organizations that have an intentional or unintentional affiliation with the heritage area and can be subdivided into the communities of place which living in or around the seat, and the communities for interest, which is collection of all those who have an interest in the conservation and management of the seat. So for me, the actors in the community include at least the government, the experts, the residents, visitors, social organizations, and the developers. This is the basic information of Westlake, which are not so important, and this is the picture of that landscape. And I want to introduce you the history of community participation in Hangzhou for Westlake. According to the existent documents, Chinese people as administrative community live around and transform the lake since at least 2,200 years ago. After the 11th century, the spatial feature between the lake and the city, named the cloud-capped hills on three sides of the lake and the city on the fourth, have been developed. Hangzhou since then is always an economic center until now. We can see amounts of literary works like the poems or the process describing its splendor. There were also constructions of water conservancy projects. For example, Su Shi, who is a famous poet, cook, politician, and engineer in China, after whom the Su Causeway is named, made an important contribution. In 1089, he requested much money and food with hundreds of indemnifications for monks, and the people were convened to clean up the lake, so the clumps of weed were removed and the lake got well. After China started industrialization, the speed of the urbanization also accelerated. There were many construction projects contribute to the integration of the city with the lake and achievement of city-lake balance. For example, the West Lake exposition were with more than 100,000 visitors in 1929. However, Westlake has been overdeveloped as a scenic area since then, and many tourist buildings and facilities were built along the lake. And until 1980s, the restoration work was generally carried out. And after the decision to become a World Heritage in 2011, many governance activities were started, and this is the basic situation before its inscription. Like Yujia, I want to use the theory of the HUL, but in a different way. The recommendation on the HUL presents three basic views. First of all, the holistic view, which implies understanding cultural heritage values in the context of the city and its geography. What's more, the inclusive view, which emphasizes the readability of the city history and experts contemporary architecture to play an active role in the historic environment. Finally, the development view, which integrates historic preservation with other goals and always adjust the production policies and practice according to the actual needs. Community involvement in Hangzhou is not only one of the important tools of HUL to be sustainable in heritage conservation, but also carries out the basic concepts of HUL itself. I also study the case with the literature reading method, and I found many documents, including the choreography in the ancient China and newspapers between the 1911 to 1949, and many government documents to build the West Lake. And I have also a survey method. These are the questions I met in the questionnaire. And the results. The holistic view is mainly reflected in the interaction between the activities and the heritage management and the use, as well as the interaction of different actors. And these two picture, I just according to my observation and the documents have a record, and this is for the actors, that we can see there is a close connection between them, forming an organic whole rather than a single participatory action. And this shows the importance of community participation in landscape conservation. For example, as as a heritage seat, the West Lake is not only brings economic benefits through tourism, but also gives people a full understanding and recognition of the value of the West Lake, such as the cultural tourism routes created based on some famous people's activities around the West Lake, and then they can deepen the visitors' love for that person and enhance the national pride and identity. The inclusive view in community engagement is not about the relationship between the contemporary architecture and the historic environment, but about the traditional culture that is still well preserved and function in the present society. This is closely tied to conscious conservation by community stakeholders as the spiritual home of the traditional Chinese literati. Many cultural traditions and costumes of West Lake continue to today. And the cultural festivals are important vehicles for this, and there are many forms of activities to choose from during the festivals. And the development wheel is mainly reflected in the management and use approaches of keeping up with the times and the inclusion of the seat conservation goal into the whole urban construction goal. For example, since 2002, the environment around the lake was well managed. However, in order to beautify the skyline of the West Lake and protect the outstanding universal value of West Lake as a cultural landscape heritage, the build height of the scenic in the scenic area still need to be controlled. So in 2019, the government lowered the floor, lowered the height of the Shangri-La Hotel to reach the goal. And also the Hangzhou Shangcheng District plan conduct a public consultation and responded to various comments which mentioned using the influence of Westlake to create an IP and establishing a high quality and international central activity zone. And this is their influence and the shortcomings. The influence is always positive. It's not so important, and I want to talk about their problems. Firstly, the silence of the social organizations. In the past literature and news, there are few records of the social organizations. Secondly, the soundness of residents' decision making, and the residents still play a role like a cooperator when the government needs them, but they have the ways to make suggestions, but no way to participate in the decision making. And this too is the institutional problems. And thirdly, I think is the issue about culture, society, and many things is the efficiency of the international promotion. And despite the great enthusiasm of the local community for the construction and management of the West Lake and the publicity of their work, it has still not caused much of a reaction in the international community. In fact, this kind of problem has already appeared before its inscription, and just this situation continues to the present. And my conclusion is, before the epidemic, community involvement in the West Lake cultural landscape of Hangzhou, which practiced HUL, was already systematic enough, and community actors were highly motivated with a wealth of activities and more attention to the local residents. There are still some small issues that require more robust social organization, empowering local residents to make decisions and trying to develop a local community voice of heritage. At the end of the epidemic, I believe that community involvement will continue to develop. Thank you all.
I have a question to Mariana. I'd like to know, how does Teto approach the communities?
My question is to Mariana. It seems to me a bit similar case with my country, Mumbai, my country, India, and the city Mumbai. I would like to know, are the houses which are called as favelas over there, are they all legal? And you mentioned that there are some 400 to 500 emergency houses that are made. What's the duration of those emergency houses, and how many people are like benefited from it? Thank you.
J'ai une question pour Imen. Je veux juste savoir si la mosquée est fonctionnelle. Si oui, comment ils font pour gérer le nombre de fidèles qui vont venir prier tout le temps? Et est-ce que c'est en phase avec les principes de conservation du bâtiment?
I have a question for Imen and two for Mariana. Imen, the Abadi faith that the Mozabites practice, what's the difference with the Sunni Islam that the majority of the population in Algeria practice? And for Mariana, these informal settlements exist all over Latin America. In Venezuela, I know exists an activity because before the Venezuelan society was disintegrated, when Venezuela was a society, there was a practice called callapa that people in this informal settlement had periodically, and it consisted to help each other. I mean, they used to in a weekend. In a weekend, cook for the whole community and help somebody to build his or her house. There is something like this in Brazil. People in the community help help their neighbors to solve their problems and to build houses. That's it.
Pour répondre à Ami, est-ce que la mosquée elle est fonctionnelle? Oui, elle est. Et comment ils font pour gérer les nombreux fidèles? En fait, la mosquée elle est assez grande à l'intérieur. Et si tu as pu voir dans la photo, il y a une grande terrasse qui entoure la mosquée. Donc pratiquement, quand il n'y a pas assez d'espace à l'intérieur, la prière se fait dans la terrasse. Et pour la préservation, en fait, c'est une architecture durable qui n'a pas besoin de beaucoup de maintenance. Mais peut-être, je dirais que les Mozabites, ils veillent à bien gérer leurs espaces, à avoir une bonne utilisation de la mosquée aussi, de chaque édifice, on va dire, culturel. And for Angel, the main difference between Sunnis and Ibadis, actually, the difference goes back to the same conflict that arose between Shias, Sunnis, and Ibadis. Ibadis were the group that was called back then Khawarij, that refused to actually take part of the conflict. And we can see this in the Ibadi community because whenever there's conflicts, a body is and a body is not there. And they're known to be very peaceful. However, their practices and beliefs are really similar to the Sunnis, but they are more, maybe let's say, how to say it? They are more practicing. They are more practicing of the teachings. Like they're very serious about them. C'est tout.
For Juliana, how does Tato approaches the community? Tato approaches the community with the community leaders, but how Tato finds out of the communities, because the precarious favelas, they're not known, they're not seen, they're forgotten. So if Tato don't know about a community yet, Tato has a database of communities in the city where it works. But for example, today Tato also works in the countryside of São Paulo. So in this way, someone went over there and told, here, there is this community that I think Tato could work on. But for example, in São Paulo, which is a big city, Tato has a work that with volunteers that work there every week, that is opening Google Maps and seeing with Google satellite which areas are too crowded, which areas are too dense, because you can see in the Google Maps where is too crowded, where the roof doesn't seem like a formal housing roof. So this is a formal way that Tato works, and Tato goes in the front of the community and asks to talk with the local leader to see if they have interest as well to build along with Tato. For Shuban, are the houses legal? No, they are not legal. The whole place is not legal, but at the end of the day, it doesn't make a difference for the government. The government don't care. But the places that the favelas are built, they're usually places that should not be built. Why? If it's in a hill, it's because the hill is too inclined. So when it rains, is what we see in Brazil, that a lot of houses, they are being destructed. Or in the margins of the rivers. You should not build in the margins of the rivers. There are protection zones. And most of those favelas, they are built in government areas, federal areas, protection zones, but also in private areas that the private sector are not using. And why emergency houses? The houses that Tato has two types of work today, concrete and emergency housing. The main work is the emergency houses, but it's called also transitional housings. They are houses that are built with wood that is a treated wood. The foundation, it's a huge foundation that is made, for example, these houses in this precarious favela, they don't have any kind of foundation. So if we have a difficult rain, the house will go away. So Tato works the first day of construction. The construction is usually 2 days. The first day is doing the foundation and then doing the houses. But why emergency? Because it's wood houses that are not meant to be lived during 5 years. It should be transitional housing until the person has a timing, has a way to live in other houses. But we see people living 10 years in the houses. And how many people are benefited? It was in the slide, but I don't remember the number correctly. But I will tell you later. And Angel, about the community sense, there are a lot of community sense. It's something that I talked about also in my article. the word favela was a word that people were ashamed of using. People were ashamed of saying, I live in a favela. So they started using community. And if you look what is a community in the dictionary, you can see that it's a favela as well. A favela can be considered a community, and people help each other, the neighborhood help each other to build the houses, to cook, to take care of the children as well. I finished it.
J'ai une question pour Hasna. Est-ce qu'avant le processus d'adaptation pour la restauration des monuments historiques, est-ce que le gouvernement, par exemple, a fait des politiques pour permettre à la population de gérer cette tragédie et de les réconcilier avec ce passé, par exemple, douloureux, comme on peut dire, avant que la population n'adopte, par exemple, ou n'ait l'envie de faire des démarches pour la restauration des monuments historiques?
Pour le gouvernement, la démarche qui ont suivi, c'était une sorte de enquête anthropologique et des entretiens auprès des survivants qui ont survécu le tremblement de terre. Mais c'était juste pour la collecte des données, je ne sais pas, en matière de... On m'a demandé, j'en ai aucune idée, sincèrement. Merci.
Rapidly, few comments again. I think you did interesting presentations. As a technical issue, attention to colors when you prepare the PowerPoints. A yellow base is normally bad for a PowerPoint because it works well in the screen, but not when you project with the contrast of colors, and it becomes very tiring for who is seeing. In terms of your written work, I saw in the presentation the focus of community traditions, but not necessarily community transformative or even adaptive practices. Maybe you can improve on that, if any, in your text. In the case of Imene, I think the aspects of social potential divisions within the MSAB could be considered. You take, as in fact many of you, when you talk about the Gagauz or this group or that group, you take it as a whole. And of course, it's one layer. There is always a layer where there is an identity, a collective identity, but within that identity, there are normally also differences that might be cultural as well, and sometimes may also be social, probably in this case, when we look at the complexity of the constructions and so on. So looking a bit to the potential contradictions and tensions inside the community is also important. In the case of the favelas, I think it's a very good case for the Bridges program. Actually, other projects that have been presented here could become very interesting Bridges projects. But in the case specifically of the favelas, just before the difficult situation that Brazil entered to a few years ago, well, it's still there. There was a project starting to try to certify the quality of heritage management in the favelas. I was doing that with Ingelor and colleagues in Brazil. Then things, of course, went in a bad direction, but eventually it could be interesting to do it. But again, in the case of the favelas, as in all the others, you mentioned actually the issue of drugs, of the drug dealers. Maybe there are other layers of contradiction, conflict that could be exploited. In the case of Jiangxi, I'm not completely sure that there is... one thing is population consultation. Another thing is community agency in terms of transformation. What is interesting in many of the presentations is we see the issues are very similar across different regions of the globe, across different regimes, pretty much the same thing. What concerns humanities, engagement, involvement in the process, and what it concerns the dynamics of the communities and the recognition of the autonomy of the communities, it's very interesting to see that it's more or less the same thing everywhere. The best solutions are often the participation level, and you have demonstrated one good example. The question would be to know to what extent you have a top-down approach that, in order to improve the top-down approach, does a consultation. But then it's a little bit like myself with you. I hear you and then I decide. So the question is, what is the room for communities that empower themselves in doing things? And there are examples in all the places, including in China, but I don't know if this is the case. Actually, what you have shown, and also in the case of Yuchia, it's pretty much the same observation. Then I think, Imene also improve a bit on the issue of methodology in your written text. Improve in the sense of exposing it better. But having said this again, congratulations. You can go there now. And
we invite Amy to come in the stage. Amy? Kasi Musa Bawa. I will tell the names wrong all the time. Yeah. Alicia? Ami. Ami Koletiam. Yeah. Angel. Anna. Anna. Nahapetian. Angel. Two. Camille. Charlene. Krina. Diana. Vivendo. Asna. Asnai. Like this. Amen. Isadora. Franklin. Juliana. Margarita. Mariana. Negazi. Omaima. Kianzi. Shanji. Haib. Ajib. Sorry. Rufus. Sandra. Tima. Shanti. Shubhan. Virginia. Ouija. Eve.